One world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another live edition of the Down the Rabbit Hole radio program here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. I want to thank everybody for tuning in once again. Tonight, I'm going to get into the subject of freedom. What is real freedom? What is true freedom? What is slavery? Is it what you think it is, or is there something even more in depth to it? Well, tonight we're going to dive into that topic, and I couldn't think of anybody better to get into this with than my good friend and fellow radio show host / researcher / all-around awesome guy, my buddy Mark Passio. Mark, welcome back to the show.
Popeye, thanks so much for having me back on your show. It's a pleasure to be here, as always.
Yeah, I love having you on, Mark, because not only, I mean, we're friends, but I like having you on because you make my brain get all in a frenzy. I like to say you make my neurons fire. You make me think, and every time I have a conversation with you, man, you always make me think of. And it doesn't mean I might sway my opinion on something one way or another, but it just gets my brain going just to even be in a conversation with you. So, as always, it's a pleasure to have you back. Let's get into the subject of real freedom.
Sure.
What would you say the definition of real freedom is?
Well, I would say that it's a birthright to operate within the parameters of natural law, meaning that you're free to do that which you will, so long as you're not causing harm to other beings and infringing upon their rights to do as they will. It's really that simple, and people try to make it more complicated than that, but it really isn't any more complicated than just that. The problem comes in where people believe that they have rights that they don't, and they believe that they are allowed to do things to operate within these parameters, these natural laws, that really they are not permitted to do certain activities, and they want to believe that they have certain rights which don't exist. Man is always and forever trying to make up rights that he doesn't have, and he is always trying to justify those behaviors, justify the invention of those rights. That's exactly what the word justify actually means. People never really question the meaning of words and the usage of common everyday words. We use the term, oh, you're justifying your actions, you're justifying your behavior. But few of us really understand where that comes from, that word. The word justify comes from two Latin words. Jus in Latin, J-U-S, means right or law. And the second part of the word justification comes from the Latin verb facio facere, which means to create or to bring about, okay? And to create right, okay? So you put these together. Facio facere, to create, right? And then jus, justification, right? Jus means right. To create a right is what a justification is. It's somebody saying, well, I'm allowed to do this. I'm making up a right that doesn't exist. And therein lies the entire problem. And unfortunately, humanity is so deceived and dumbed down to what rights are and what they are not, that they have actually fallen for a grand deception of a certain class of people claiming that they have rights that they do not. But not only even making that claim, which is ridiculous enough on its face, they are then going ahead and then claiming that other people have the moral obligation to obey that claim to a right which does not exist. So they're making a claim of a right and saying, we have this right that doesn't actually exist in nature. We're making a claim that is completely false. We're getting you to believe in that claim, but even more than that, getting you to believe in our right to do something we have no right to do. We're actually then getting you to take on a responsibility or a moral obligation that doesn't exist and say, well, it's a crime for anybody to disobey this claim of me saying I have a right to do this. And this is all centered entirely around the concept of ownership. And this is what real freedom is going to take. For us to acquire real freedom, it's going to take us a deep understanding. We're going to have to accumulate a deep understanding of what ownership is and what it really is about. Because if we don't understand ownership, we can't be free. It's an impossibility. And ownership has everything to do with natural law and how it operates and how our behaviors within the parameters of natural law or outside of their boundaries, as the case may be, bring us the experiences in our everyday life that are either going to make us more free and help us to progress on our evolutionary journey, okay? Or they're going to make these decisions that we make and the consequences that we reap as a result of those decisions being made are going to bring us more enslavement and suffering. So right now, humanity is at a point where their evolutionary progress is stunted. It is stunted by the ridiculousness of the things that they believe in. Their beliefs has stunted their forward evolutionary progress in consciousness, okay? And therefore, it has also stunted their freedom. We're at a state of stalled freedom, and most people would say it's not just stalled, it's rapidly moving backwards on itself. And I would agree with that we're not only not moving toward greater freedom, we're moving toward greater states of enslavement every day as more people believe in this ridiculous notion of authority, the claim that one person actually has a right to own another person, which is basically what slavery is. And people don't recognize that that's the system that is in effect today. And they'll continue to do things which are in keeping with this master-slave relationship. And they will never decide to step outside of it and call someone else on their complete nonsense belief. They'll never call someone on their BS behavior, okay, like police who want to come and try to take something from you that belongs to you because some politician wrote down a law and made a claim, you have to give me a certain percentage of what you have, otherwise I'm coming to take it by force, which is what all taxation is. People, there's a debate going on in, I believe, North Dakota right now over property taxes. And the state legislature has put forward a proposition to try to get property taxes abolished in that state. And you would be shocked and appalled at the people who are in opposition to this, who want to say that we should continue to have property taxes and nobody should really be owning the so-called property that they are living in. People don't understand the meaning of the word property, obviously. I think this is one of the reasons that it was so de-emphasized in the founding of this country, because even the founders wanted to lay and collect taxes on the people. I mean, they had things equivalent to property taxes even before the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And life, liberty, and property was what was really talked about. But then it was struck and made into life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness because, the absolute right to property, I guess they didn't really want to put that in there to give people any ideas that what was theirs was truly theirs, okay? When you talk about ownership, the things we're really talking about that we own is our life, our rights, which is all about our freedom, okay, or liberty, and our property. And there is such a thing as property, okay? People want to have this debate, there shouldn't be any such thing as property and no private ownership of anything. Well, that's a nonsense idea in and of itself, because all property means is while I'm using this, you may not rightfully take it away from me. My house is my property because I am using it. That's why it's called property. It is proper for me to not be thrown out of my home because I happen to be using this. It is mine. I acquired it rightfully, and I have a right to be here. And someone else doesn't have a right to throw me out of my home because I can't, let's say, pay them an extortion fee that they've demanded for services that they're telling me I must have. See, people will say, a property tax is for services rendered. Your sewage, your sanitation, taking trash away, the road outside your house. But none of these are voluntary services that I've entered into. These are the things that the state says, you have to pay for because we're providing it. Well, who else comes to your door and says, you have to pay for this because I'm giving it to you? Here's a loaf of bread. You must pay for it. You have no choice. See, this is complete flawed logic. It's all based on logical fallacies and this other equally ridiculous and flawed logic called a social contract, which does not exist. It's a made-up thing. It's a construct in the human mind for a sociopath to say, I have ownership over you. There's this thing as a social contract. If you're living in a society, you have to do what we, as the makers of the society, say that you must do. Well, that's the same thing as claiming that because someone was alive longer than someone else and they were here first, then you have to do everything that they say because they made the rules. So anybody who's older than anybody else gets to make the rules. Anybody who was here first, that means children are, by that logic, it means children are the eternal slaves of their parents, don't you know? It all flies in the face of the basic concept of ownership, primarily the first and foremost issue of self-ownership. And this is something that people still can't really fully grasp, and nor can they fully elucidate it. They can't communicate this concept. I look on forums of people talking about whether a property tax should be there or not, and they never get to the principle. They skirt the issue. They talk about all kinds of ancillary and secondary things, but none of them ever actually hit the principle dead center. The principle here is, do you own your house? If you own your house, then someone cannot tell you that you have to give them a certain amount, regardless of how big or small that arbitrarily chosen amount happens to be, for you to be allowed to keep it. So in other words, let's say you have a bike, okay? So someone has a bike. They've bought a bike, they've gone to the store, they've bought the bike, and they own the bike. Now this is their property. Now if a common street thug were to come along, crack them in the face, okay, with a pair of brass knuckles or something, knock them unconscious, take the bike, and take off with it, everybody would almost universally agree, probably all but the most psychopathic lunatics among us, but I bet you could probably approach a 100% agreement factor that would be something wrong to do, and that person should be held accountable for, and that's called theft. Because they took something that didn't belong to them. They didn't earn it. They didn't buy it rightfully. They didn't acquire it rightfully. They beat somebody for it. They attacked someone for it. They engaged in violence to obtain it. The original person, it was their property by right, and someone else took it from them. Okay, even while they were using it, they may have knocked them right off of it. Okay, this is wrong. This is the entire basis of universal natural law. And when I say natural law, the first thing I want to clear up, because we have to get definitions straight first and foremost. This is part of the problem with the human animal, is that they don't really understand language, okay? And they have the wrong notion of what terms are when they're being spoken by someone. When I say natural law, this is an entire study unto itself. It doesn't mean that what people often think that things mean what they have a preconceived notion that they mean in their own mind based on their definitions of words, okay? And when you say natural law to most people, the first thing they think of is the social Darwinistic idea of survival of the most ruthless, okay? Or in other words, base jungle law. We could look at it as. In other words, the one who is able to kill the other one or has the most physical force or power to kill and control has the right to come out on top. That is absolutely the antithesis, meaning it is the exact opposite of what natural law is. That has nothing whatsoever to do with what natural law is. And that's the entire problem, is people get confused with words and terms. When we're talking about natural law, we mean exactly what the words are saying. Natural, meaning not man-made, okay? Not made by humankind whatsoever. Man did not put it into effect. Man did not create this. It is self-existing. It exists primary to man's existence. Okay, before man existed, natural law was still there. It was still in effect because it wasn't created by man. It was created by the universe. If you want to use the word God, go right ahead. I personally have no problem with that terms. Our agnostic friends who are listening, or our atheistic friends who are listening, might have a problem with that term being used, that God made natural law. I personally don't have a problem with that term, but that's what it is. It's the universal laws of creation that are self-existing. The universe made these laws.
I mention this all the time, Mark, universal law. And a lot of people, when you start to say universal law, that's when you get, I've had people say to me, oh, Popeye, are you getting all new age on me? And I'm like, no, there are some basic laws that this universe and everything in it operate on. And the reason, one of the biggest reasons that people don't understand this and laugh at that concept is because it's been bred out of us.
That's right.
You know, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, people that were around understood this kind of stuff. That's why all these, like Michael Tsarian talks about all the shamanic tribes that used to do the dances and stuff, and, you know, put out the good vibes and stuff into the earth. And a lot of that, people can say, oh, that's new agey, but it's not. That's not new age. New age is that false crap like what the hell's her name? I think her name's Sylvia Brown or whatever. She's like one of these false psychics or whatever, and she has people. You know, she's very new agey with the way she brings up the Gnostic gospels a lot and all this other stuff. That's new agey crap. The way she goes on.
I would say what new age is to me is people who think that just because of your belief that makes it so. And that's what new aginess is, that you think that you can think the universe into being. And things don't work like that. Yes, our thoughts eventually become the things that we have to deal with in reality, but it doesn't mean you can make up however you want something to be and then magically that's the way it is. That's what new aginess is, okay? It's also this concept of that if you look at something that is negative, that you'll attract that to you. And that's not how the law of attraction works or operates. The law of attraction works on the principles that are guided by natural law. Meaning, you could look at these as the laws of behavioral consequence, that if you put out a certain vibratory energy through your behavior into the living universe, it is acting as a mirror to bring the experience to you that you need to learn and grow from. Okay? And there's nothing new agey about that concept. This is universal laws of behavioral consequence. See, people don't want to believe that there are repercussions and consequences to their choices, and then the choices that they act upon, which is their behaviors. They don't want to believe that. They want to think. People want to believe, and then by their belief system, make it true that you can make a choice to behave in any way you want to behave, and ultimately there are no consequences. And I don't mean consequences just of other people. If you happen to get caught doing something that is considered wrong by someone else. That's not what I mean here. I mean, regardless of whether anyone catches you doing the thing that is perceived to be wrong by another person, if it's wrong according to the universal laws of creation, of behavioral consequence, that are not made by man, that are pre-existing and self-existing in the universe, you are going to be held accountable in your life. Now, maybe not in this life even, but you're going to be held accountable in the physical domain according to those behaviors that you chose. And the experience that you have is going to be directly determined. The quality of that experience is going to be directly determined by those behaviors. So the quality of your behavior is going to ultimately determine the quality of your experience. This is a universal natural law. It is the law of cause and effect. And people aren't
I want to
free.
touch on that for a
Yes.
second in case people don't understand that. That basically means if you put out shit, you're going to get back shit, okay? To break it down for the layman that don't understand it. That's as simple as that.
Garbage in, garbage out. In computer terms, that's how you would put it. Garbage goes in, garbage comes out. You input garbage into the computer, it outputs garbage onto the screen or onto the printer or onto the internet or wherever the information is going out to. So we need to understand that natural means that it's not made by man, and law means that it's not up to us. Our belief is completely irrelevant when it comes to a law. A law operates at all times and places flawlessly. Laws are immutable. That means they can't be changed by anything that human beings do.
Just because you want it to be changed, you can't. It doesn't mean it's going to happen or that's the way things are just because of your personal preference. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a few. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. And really quick, when I was talking about the New Age wackos before, when I said, I made a mistake. I said Gnostic Gospels, and I didn't go into detail. I kind of left that for a second. I don't think that anybody that reads the Gnostic Gospels are nuts, because there's some interesting things in there. In fact, Mark and I are going to bring something up in a second. But the New Age itself, the New Age religion, whatever the hell you want to call it, that stuff that's another mind prison, and that was created to catch all the people that are leaving all the other religions and looking for something, and that was this catch-all, filter to catch all of them. And a lot of times they do take pieces of real information or good stuff and use it to make themselves sound credible or accurate. And I didn't quite state that properly, because I always encourage people to read. Don't just read books from authors I tell you to read. Go out and, when you get their books, read their sources. Go out and buy all the old books that they talk about. And then when you get those old books, read those and get the books that those guys talk about. I urge you to read, and do as much research as you can. So I didn't want that to come out like I was making fun of any literature in general. So I just wanted to make sure that was fixed properly, because I don't like when sometimes I have a tendency to get off on other subjects and I forget to address things. So, all right, that's done. Now, Mark, during the break, we were talking about how one of the biggest problems people have is they don't, especially when it comes to like natural law and this type of thing, when you look into it, it inevitably leads one to look into yourself. Because you have to. That's where that path goes.
Sure. I'd like to segue from your point on the false teachings of the New Age movement. Is part of it is that they never teach people to exercise discernment. People will say, oh, well, if you say someone else is doing something wrong, that's judging. No, it's called calling somebody else on their bullshit is what it's called. And that the New Age movement doesn't want people to do that. They want you to dance around other people and like you're walking on eggshells and never come out and say, hey, your decision to do that is wrong. It's not within the boundaries of natural law, and you have no right. You're not within right, because they want you to think of things in all relative terms and never actually say there is an objective standard of right and wrong. And it has to do with whether someone is harmed and whether their rights are tread upon by someone else. And this is what the New Age movement is guilty of. And I don't see how anybody could in any way compare anything I'm saying to New Age stuff, because I've talked about the dangers of the New Age movement and the kind of stuff that they're doing, because they don't want people to look at the negative. They don't want them to look at the conspiratorial aspects, at all the horrific things that are being done in our world to people. Oh, because to them, that's drawing it toward you. No, it isn't. It's called shining the light on the darkness. And it's also called calling people on their bullshit, which not enough people are willing to do in today's world. And that's why we're in this mess.
I agree. 10-4. People do not like to call a spade and call people out. And if they do something, they don't want to be, nobody wants to be, I don't want to be confrontational. That's the term I'm looking for.
Yes.
Confrontational. You know how many times I hear that? Popeye, I'm not a confrontational person. You're confrontational. No, I'm not. I don't like confrontation. I don't wake up in the morning going, God, I hope I get to yell at somebody today, or I hope I get to put somebody in their place today, that really deserves it. I don't do that at all. Okay? What happens is I see people doing stupid things, and I can only tolerate it so much. And if I see someone hoisting the BS, or if I see someone, spouting BS, I have to hoist the flag and say, wrong. I'm sorry. That's the way I am. I was raised that way.
When it comes to truth, right? By its very nature, truth is confrontational. Truth is combative. There's no way around that. Truth is extreme. People want to think that, it's all relative. It's not relative. It's all one way. Truth is that which has occurred, that which is. That's extreme. That means out of all the possibilities, truth is that one thing which actually coalesced and became an actual point of fact reality in the physical domain. That's what the truth is. And that's an extremity, because out of all of those infinite possibilities, truth is the one thing that actually became that which is. And we have to stop looking at things in all these relative terms, because it's not about perception. Perception is not reality. Reality is reality. That which is the truth. We have to align our perceptions with that. That's what our goal needs to be. And, you look at the term controversial. This is another interesting term to look at the meaning of, because a lot of the things that people who are speaking truth are saying are perceived by other people as extreme and controversial. When you look up the definition of the word controversial, you look up the etymological definition of it. Contra in Latin means face to face, okay, or directly up against. And then the second part, versial, comes from the Latin verb versare, V-E-R-S-A-R-E, versare. That means to change. So controversial means face to face with changing. Think about that for a minute. When something is controversial, it means that we're staring change face to face. And that's what creates the conflict. That's what creates the confrontational nature of truth, because most people don't want to change. They want to keep going along with their destructive behavior. They want to keep going on with behaviors that they have absolutely no right to, and that they want to continue to justify, that they are somehow allowed to do these behaviors when in no way under natural law they are allowed to perform these behaviors. And they are going to be held to account, whether in this life or in another reality, they're going to be held to account. And people who want to think that when they're dead, everything that they got away with in life, they got away with after life. And I guarantee you are sorely mistaken to that fact. One thing I do know that this universe is, it is a system of balance. And that means what you have withdrawn that you had no right to withdraw from this system of balance, this huge bank that we call the universe, okay, you're going to have to pay back. You're going to have to make restitution on that balance that you withdrew on, that you did not have the right to withdraw on. Okay? You're going to have to put it back, set it back to the balance point to make it even. Okay? That's what this whole place is all about. Creating balance. That's the goal of the universe, is balance. And it creates that balance through natural law principles. And again, these are not dependent on belief. This is what people have to get outside of their head. This is what ego is, ladies and gentlemen. Ego is the force inside someone's mind that wants them to ignore the fact that you're living in a universe that is governed by law. It wants you to believe, to erect a set of beliefs that laws of the universe are not applicable to you. That's what ego actually really is. That's its goal. That's what it's doing. It's this force that's in operation within an individual that's saying to them in their mind, there's no such thing as laws governing the universe. You can do whatever you want. Go ahead. Just do that. Go ahead and do it. You have a right to do it. You want to do it, don't you? Just go do it. That's ego speaking that into your mind, telling you there's no consequences for that. You'll get away with it. Don't worry about it. You'll get away with it. Just go ahead. Trample all over that guy's rights. You have the right to do it. That's the ego speaking. And it's always telling us that we have rights that we don't have. And people believe in it. They buy into it. And not only do they buy into it, they become identified with this voice that's telling them, go ahead, do whatever you want. There's no consequences.
A perfect example of that is a cop violating someone's natural law, civil rights, physical space. They're faced with a nightstick. You know what I mean? That cop identifies with that identity of wearing that uniform and that badge, and that is ego. Right. He's identifying with this false persona, this false ego, and it's not really who he is or she is.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Ego is also, another part of it is identification with a role. And it's also identification with a set of beliefs, which and in the example you gave, that cop is identifying with a belief in authority that also is an illusion and is not real, because there is no such thing as authority of people over other people. There is no such thing. There is only the claim of that. And then there is the either direct acceptance of that claim or a covert acceptance of that claim. And I'll explain what I mean by that. A lot of people covertly accept the claim of ownership on them. You do that when you accept a property tax. You do that when you accept an income tax. You do that when you accept drug laws. Okay? All of these things are claims of ownership on you. On you. And this is what people never hit the heart of the matter on. They never actually get down to the principle on the issue of ownership. Most of all, above all other forms of ownership, self-ownership, which means the right to life, the right to live. Okay? We have the right to life. We have the right to rights, which is what freedom is hinged upon. The knowing of what natural law rights are and what wrongs are, what things that we do not have a right to do because they are wrong. This is why it's called right and wrong. That's why it's called a right that we have, because it's based upon whether it's right or wrong. And there is a real objective standard for that needs to be deeply understood by people. And this is the problem. This is why people are in a state of retardation. This is another word. People want to believe that it means what they think it means, and they only think of maybe a mentally handicapped individual. When you say the word retarded, they don't actually look at the actual definition of the word. The word retard is a verb in the English language, and it means to delay or to slow down, to hold back, to set back, to detain, to restrain, to hinder from forward progress, to obstruct or get in the way of, okay, to inhibit, to impede, or to restrict. All of these things mean, what it means is you're simply stopping forward movement. To retard something is to slow it down. And to now to say to be retarded is to be slowed down. Okay?
Exactly.
So,
like, the term retard is actually used in mechanics. You would retard the timing on your engine. Right. They do it. They say when you take your car in, they use a timing light to check the timing on it. Okay?
Retard the flow of a substance. You have a substance that you're trying to pour. You might want to retard the flow of that substance.
But see, again, that's word magic, Mark. That's and through the educational system and mass media and pop culture, people have been conditioned, and words have actually been twisted from their original meaning.
That's right. And they've been limited in scope. People's connotative application of a word is now limited in scope to meaning only one thing. This is unidimensional thinking that we need to work our way out of. So just to go to the passive sense, right? If we tack on ed onto the verb retard, now we're saying you're doing that to someone, okay? You are retarding them. Okay, they have now become retarded. Okay, meaning, now let's just use the same definition, but add on a passive sense to this. Okay, so to be delayed, to be slowed down, to be held back, to be set back, to be detained, to be restrained, to be hindered from forward progress.
Like thought.
Right, to be obstructed, to be inhibited,
somebody brings up a good point.
To be restricted.
Somebody brought up a good point in the chat room, Mark. They say, like, Obama tards or Paul tards or whatever, especially with the Obama bots, you see that limit in thinking, okay, that they only think so far and then they allow the person to take over. I'm glad the chatters are kind of getting it a little bit. Exactly. They are retarded in a sense because they are not up to speed. We all are in a sense. And, waking up is the process of getting back in step. That's right. Unretarding yourself.
That's correct. Speeding up, accelerating in consciousness is the process of de-retardation, okay? Or in other words, acceleration, moving forward now. You're not hindered anymore. You're not inhibited. You're not restricted. You're free-flowing. You're sped up, okay? You're not slowed down in your learning process. The problem is humanity has become retarded when it comes to the understanding of natural law. They have been held back from this understanding because this is occulted information. Why would anyone want to occult laws of nature? See, this is what the bottom line, the people have to think on these terms. Why would anyone want to hold back an understanding as important as, let's say, the law of gravity? Because that's a law of nature. Now, if that were held back from someone, and then someone went up to the edge of a cliff and did not understand that things fall downward if you go off an edge of something. Let's say the law of gravity was completely held back from you, okay? Now, it would be difficult to do because all things would have to be held back from you because the first thing you drop, you're going to understand how gravity works, okay? Even if you fall to the ground from a standing position, you're probably going to begin to understand it in the physical realm, how it operates. But just let's say you condition someone from the time they were born to not recognize that there is a law in operation known as gravity, okay, regardless of what you call it. It's a law that makes things fall downward. And then you put them right in front of a cliff, okay? Well, this is what humanity is right now. We are the retarded child who has been held back from understanding, okay, who has not developed in their understanding of laws that exist in nature that you're bound by, that are in operation and that you are affected by, whether you believe in them or not, and that if you take certain steps or measures, you are going to be deeply affected by those laws. And that's what's happening to humanity right now. We're coming up to a critical mass juncture, a choice point, okay, in the evolution of our species, where we are given the choice to understand the operations of the laws of nature and to work within their parameters and therefore have the opportunity to thrive and prosper, or we will make the choice to ignore the operations of those natural laws, and we are going to suffer the consequences as a result of that ignorance, because the opportunity to understand these things is here. We are not nescient of them. When you're nescient of something, it means that the knowledge was not present, therefore you could not have known it. That's called nescience. It means not to know, but connotatively not to know, meaning there's a certain set of circumstances that were present that caused you not to know. The information was not possible for you to obtain or to know. That's called nescience. And one cannot be held guilty of being in a nescient state. That is something that is done to someone. But that's not the case when it comes to humanity in the modern day. In modern times, humanity is most certainly not nescient. It is ignorant. See, if you're ignoring someone, they're in the room with you. You know that they're there. You're aware of their presence, but you're deliberately not acknowledging it. And that's where humanity is at. These laws, we have the opportunity to recognize their presence, to acknowledge them, to admit that we are doing something wrong, to admit that we are living outside of the boundaries of the boundary conditions provided by these natural laws, and to make corrections for that wrong behavior. But we want to ignore them because humanity is the retarded child who keeps putting his hand on the stove over and over and over again until he burns his flesh off. We want to think that we can act outside the parameters of creation's laws. We get to make up what the laws of creation are, because we're the arbiters of truth. Because truth isn't something that's independent and objective. It's something that's subjective, and we get to make it up, don't you know? That's what people think. Truth is subjective. It all hinges upon my beliefs, my opinions. It has absolutely nothing to do with what the universe has set into motion, or, if you will, what God has set into motion, okay? And again, you can get offended by that term. I really don't care. If you want to look at it as God, go right ahead. But you can look at it as the dynamic living intelligence that underlies the entire universe, that underlies all of creation. Okay? For me, God is an acceptable term for that force, but call it whatever you will. And the problem is people either think that does not exist, okay, that these laws are not in operation, okay, or that they can somehow act in complete and total negligence of the operations of these laws and somehow prosper anyway. You could exist in complete ignorance of these laws and somehow you're going to magically be okay. And it just doesn't work like that. That's all there is to it. And this isn't a religious belief system. This is not a New Age belief system. Again, I keep explaining to people, this has zero to do with belief at all. Belief does not enter into the picture whatsoever. You're not required to believe in these laws. You can continue to act in complete contradiction with these laws, whether you are aware of them or not, whether you believe in them or not, whether you accept them or not, and you're still going to reap the negative consequences as a result of doing so.
Well, that's why things are so ass backwards nowadays, and why people are so out of sorts, and everybody has to go on pills because they don't feel right, and everybody has a problem, but they know there's an issue. They just don't know exactly what it is, Mark. They can't hit the nail on the head. They don't know why they feel the way they do, or why they're antsy, or whatever the case may be. And this is the reason why, because we are out of our natural balance.
They can't get to the level of causality.
Exactly.
They're still wrestling with the effects and looking at the symptoms and thinking you're going to find the solution in the symptoms or the results. You'll never find the solution there. The solution lies in the realm of causes, which means you have to understand the law and how it operates so you can understand how you're producing the effects that you're generating.
I agree. And if we don't understand this basic stuff, I know it sounds kind of weird to a lot of people, but if we don't study this and research it and understand it, we're never truly going to be able to free ourselves, because this is the real system and the real way of things, and it's being used against us. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with our number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com, and joining me tonight is my good friend, fellow researcher, and radio show host, Mark Passio. Mark, I want to say thank you for coming back on again and hanging out with me real quick. And
it's a pleasure, and thanks for having me.
I want to plug your site again.
Sure.
What on earth is happening, ladies and gentlemen? I use it. I go there, and I actually rip Mark's podcast and stuff, and I listen to him. And I try to listen to what he says. And, you know, Mark, I don't have to agree with every little thing that you say every moment in time. But I have to say, honestly, especially when it comes to the natural law, the way the universe works, you and I are, I understand what you're talking about. I don't want to say we're right on par with each other, because it's not like we're the only two that understand this. It is the way it is. It's just we understand it. And I used to be one of these people that would be like, all right, I think you're getting a little hippy-dippy-ish, I would say that to people that would, maybe when I was younger. And that was me being stupid. That was my ego blocking me from seeing the things. Again, conditioning that we go through. The conditioning from the time you're a child, the educational system, your parents, peer pressure, all that conditions you so that when you hear something that that is out of the ordinary, unless you don't care what anybody thinks, unless you're a rebel, you have that rebel attitude usually that you don't really give a crap what anybody else thinks. A lot of times you will conform to, what you've been conditioned to do. And before I forget, last hour we were talking about the Gnostic Gospels, and there's something I wanted to bring up really quick. Again, ladies and gentlemen, go watch the movie Kymatica by Ben Stewart. Yeah, you can go to FederalJack.com, go to the Truth movie section. It's right in there. You got to watch the movie, or go on YouTube, just look it up, or Google. You got to watch the movie, because if you want to understand what we're talking about, let me put it that way. If you want to understand what Mark and I are talking about, Ben Stewart goes into it a lot more in Kymatica, and actually Esoteric Agenda as well as first one. But the second one, 2 great movies, yes. But this, I think, especially for what Mark and I are talking about right now, Kymatica really gets into it. And Ben actually quotes something from the Gnostic Gospels, which Mark actually knows, and he's going to recite on air. And it's really important. Again, this goes to dealing with when I say you got to face your fears and deal with them and move on and, move past them. It's the same thing. You must face your demons as well. The things that you do not like about yourself.
Right.
The things you detest that make you so angry that you project it onto others and attack them for that very thing, you must slay that demon. Trust me, I've been down that road and I still do it. Every day I face my own demons and deal with it. And you know what? We must acknowledge it. And I think this quote really sums it up. So go ahead, Mark.
Well, Popeye, I just want to say before I read it is that's what self-respect is all about. And if anything is going to enable us to really live in harmony with each other, it's when we first develop respect for ourselves. That's what the word respect means. Re in Latin means again, and specto spectare, the second part of the word respect, means to look at. So it means to take another look at, to look at again. And what you need to look at again is yourself. It's a gaze into the mirror. It's a gaze within is what we really need to get out of this mess that we're in as a species. That's what respect is all about. You can't ever really project that and give that to someone else unless you develop it within first. Self-respect has to come first before you can respect anyone else. So in the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, from Nag Hammadi Library, Jesus is quoted as saying in this gospel that if you bring forth that which is within you, that which you bring forth will save you. But if you do not bring forth that which is within you, that which you do not bring forth will destroy you. So he's saying the answer to all of it lies within ourselves. If we confront the inner self, take a look at what is there and bring it forward out into the open and work with it to change it, to make it better, then we're going to be okay. But if we continue to suppress everything, keep it in, keep the demons in, never work with our dark demon material, in other words, never take a look at our dark motivations, never take a look at the actions which we're doing, which aren't in accord with natural law. It's not the end of the world, okay? If we decide, hey, there's something I was doing here that I'm not very proud of, that I know was wrong, and that I need to make corrections toward. You don't even need to do it all at once. I was not anywhere near my current level of understanding in the past, in my life, okay? I grew toward this level of understanding over time. It didn't immediately happen overnight. It happened over years, but it happened years of wanting to change, wanting to improve, wanting to fight against that involutionary force, that force which retards and holds back, and to break past it, to break through it, and to climb that mountain, that's seemingly impossible to climb by an act of my own will. I made the decision to do that. The problem is when people won't work with that shadow material, they won't look at the negative things that they don't like about themselves. And as you said, then they go and project it onto someone else, and then they want to try to basically take out all of that pent-up aggression and frustration out on someone else in a way that is completely in contradiction with natural law and with their rights, because they don't have a right to do that. And this is the problem. This is why people are acting so psychotically and psychopathically in the modern world, because they won't deal with that shadow material. I love Michael Tessarion's explanation of this. He likens it to eating off of a dirty dinner plate. No one would think of doing this in the physical world, of just never dealing with the garbage, with the actual, to just let garbage accrue in one's house and never take it out, never get rid of it, or to let dirty food build up on a dinner plate and then just go right back, never wash the plate and go right back and heap more food on it and eat off the same dirty plate. It would be unthinkable in the physical domain to do this, but we do it in the psychic domain. We never clear out our psychic baggage or our psychic garbage or the psychic trash that accumulates within us. We never deal with it and bring it out into the open, so it's all accumulating inside of us. And that's what is meant in this Gnostic gospel. Jesus is saying, if you don't bring forth the shadow material, it's going to destroy you. It's going to poison you and ultimately destroy you and be your end. It's going to be your undoing. And people should take heed of words of wisdom like that, because that's the words of a master, of someone who has attained self-mastery and understands what it's really going to take to acquire true freedom. But see, I want to coin a new term. I told Popeye this off the air, and I made it a teaser to him even, because I want to coin a new term today that I hope will make the rounds in the alternative media community, okay?
I've been waiting to hear this because he wouldn't even tell me off air. He made me wait.
I have a new term for the freedom movement. The so-called freedom movement, right? Okay, people generally call it the freedom movement, okay, or the liberty movement, whatever you want to call it, okay? I want to term it the My Freedom movement, because that's why it's a failure. See, it's not the freedom movement. We haven't given birth as a people to a true freedom movement yet. That hasn't even begun, because we haven't even begun to understand the causal factors that have led to our enslavement. We don't know the why. We don't understand why we're really in this position. We think it's all things that are being done to us by other people or by this elite group. And I'm not saying that there is no such group of individuals. I'm not saying there are no psychopaths at the top of a pyramidal structure, of a hierarchical and compartmentalized structure, because that's certainly the case. Make no mistake. But we're ultimately doing this to ourselves because we are going along with their thought forms, with their agenda. oftentimes unwittingly, because we do not understand the laws of nature. We do not understand natural law, okay? And how our behavior is shaping the reality that we then must live in. We are actually bringing this experience unto ourselves through our ignorance of the laws of behavioral consequence, the laws of cause and effect. And until we understand that, there's not going to be freedom for anyone until we understand the why. So see, the problem is the current, quote, freedom movement, and I always use that term in quotes now because there is no such thing as an actual freedom movement, okay? It's the semblance of a freedom movement. You want to call it something, call it the problem movement. Because it's people who have largely recognized that there's a problem. Yes, they instead of even calling it the problem movement, because that might imply you know why the problem is there. Let's call it the symptom movement. Okay, how about that? We know the symptoms. We can recognize the symptoms, and a lot of good that'll do you. Okay, but you haven't made a diagnosis, meaning through. Dia in Greek means through or by way of or by means of. And gnosis means knowledge in the Greek language. To make a diagnosis means to understand by way or by means of knowledge how something got that way. That's what a diagnosis is. You apply knowledge and you know, hey, I understand now what caused that, what created that. So now I can go and treat the causal level of the problem, and then I can affect the symptoms. I can improve the symptoms by treating it at the causal level. But the My Freedom movement, these are people who recognize that there's a problem and they want the problem to go away for them. They don't necessarily want to stand up for truth. They don't really want to stand up for justice for all people. They don't really want to stand up for equity. They certainly don't want to develop a real, true, deep understanding of the laws of behavioral consequence. Okay, they don't want any part of that. At least I shouldn't use a blanket statement. The vast majority of them. Okay, it's not all. There are a core within this community that really get it. Okay, and it's encouraging to see that there is a core that get it. But they're so few and far between. I would label it as the numbers as paltry, a paltry few, meaning hardly any, but there are some. It's a tiny few that really understand it from the level of causality, from the level of natural law. And that number is slowly increasing, slowly, but not nearly at the rate of acceleration that we needed to really put a dent in this slavery machine that is going to eat us alive unless more of us wake up and with extreme acceleration. Let's put it that way. So what I want to get, so the My Freedom movement is what I'm going to henceforth refer to the freedom movement as. It's the My Freedom movement because it's all about me and whether I happen to be free, whether I happen to be in a state of discomfort.
Which is a trick because that's the ego. Me, exactly. Myself, and I is the ego.
Exactly.
And I say this all the time, and I throw this out no matter what the conversation's about. It always comes back to this, Mark. I always end up bringing our show we did up on the 28th of October last year when we were talking about Satanism.
Right.
And you hit the nail on the head that the basic tenet of Satanism is all about me, myself, and I, ego.
That's it.
And that's what this is. It's like and it's attached to so many different things. What we're talking about now, money, monai, you know what I mean? The worship, the love of money. Where do you think the term, the love of money is the root of all evil?
That's right.
That's where the term comes from.
Sure.
So I just thought I'd throw that in there. I didn't mean to cut you off, Mark. Go on.
It's why some people have woken up because their lives have been discomforted. Their situation has become obstructed in some form, and they want that opened up for them, but not necessarily for everyone. It's people who want to point fingers at others instead of pointing the finger inward and saying, what am I doing that's contributing to the overall dynamic of the loss of freedom in our world? And so many people would be appalled to find out how much they're involved in it. through their thought forms, number one, through their willingness to give over a product of what they make to pedophiles and mass murderers and people who are already in the process of assaulting and raping their freedoms, and yet they continue to do it. You know, nobody ever said that this was going to be easy. It may require losing your job. It may require not having money. It may require being even more poor than you already are. It may require stopping doing what you're currently doing because you don't have any right to do it. See, this is what I tell people. They say, what do I need to do to be free? And I say, you're thinking about it entirely wrong. It has absolutely nothing to do with what you need to do. It has everything. It is entirely about what you need to stop doing that you're already doing, that's keeping you in a cage. That's the problem. People want to say, listen, I want to be able to keep my hand in this flame and not have it be burnt. That's what I want. You say, what do you want? Okay, I want to be free. But, okay, you want to be free. Okay, well, tell me what you're doing in your life. Well, I'm doing this, this, and this. Oh, well, that is completely out of bounds of natural law. You're not in right to currently be doing that. Yeah, but I still want to continue to do it because my paycheck is dependent upon doing that. And I still want to be free, even though I'm continuing to do that thing. And this is the same thing as saying, listen, I want to step off of that cliff and I want to hang up in the air and float like a balloon. Well, good luck. You can want that all you want. But laws are in operation. It's not up to you whether that is how it works. You can believe that and you can want that all you want, but that's never going to make it true. You don't want to hit the ground. You can't walk off the cliff edge. Okay? That's how it works. You don't do that if you want not to hit the ground and explode. Okay? Like a bag of blood. Okay? If you don't want that to happen, then don't walk off the cliff. But if you walk off the cliff, that's gonna happen. It's not up to you whether it happens or your belief. And this is what people don't want to accept. They refuse to accept this. They want to say, listen, I want to drink this glass of water. Now watch, I'm going to drink it. Here it goes. It's going down the gullet. There it goes. And I want it to be in the glass after I put the glass back down on the table. I want that water to be simultaneously in my belly and in the glass at the same time. That's what I want. You know, it's the old adage of I want to have my cake and eat it too, which means I want it on the plate at all times. Every time I go to that plate, I want the cake on it. But when I eat it, I want it to be in my belly. But then after it's in my belly, I still want it to be on the plate. Okay? This is what people think can be. You know, laws are in operation. As long as you're doing certain things that are contrary to right, meaning that you do not have a right to do them, you're not going to have your freedom. The universe is going to rearrange the situations of reality to bring you slavery because that's what you're putting out into it. You're saying, I'm going to take something that isn't mine. And this, again, has to bring us back to the first thing I started to talk about. And we really need to hammer this in and get to a deep understanding of this. And this is the principle of ownership. Without the understanding of what you own, meaning what you have a right to do something to, okay, and what you do not own, which means without direct, express, voluntary permission, you do not automatically have the right to do something to that thing because you don't own it. So in other words, go back to the example of the robber of the bicycle. He doesn't have a right to do that to, one, the person's jaw, who he hit with brass knuckles. Why? Because it's not his jaw. It doesn't belong to him. It belongs to the other person who is inhabiting that vehicle for the expression of their consciousness. That's not his body. It's someone else's body. Okay? So he has no right to hit it with brass knuckles to knock it off the bike. 2, he doesn't own the bike. It wasn't his property. So he has no right to hop on that after he knocks the person off of it with the brass knuckles and take the bike and run away with it. It's called theft. It's theft on 2 accounts. 1, he robbed the person's well-being, which he had no right to take. Okay? And injured them. And that's a natural law transgression. And then 2, he stole an actual inanimate object, a physical piece of property, which he had no right to take. When you understand ownership, all natural law transgressions, in other words, all breaking of natural law comes down to a property issue. Okay? It's an issue of ownership. Okay? And there's 4 overarching natural law sins or transgressions for people who have a hard time with the word sin. Okay? This is how you break natural law. There's 4 overarching ways. And yet I say overarching because, yes, there could be degrees within this, okay? But there's 4 main natural law transgressions. Murder is the first. Now, you could look at this as all bodily damage to someone else's body that you have no right to damage, okay? And again, you could say that provisionally that means you initiated the harm. If someone is coming up to you with a gun and saying, I'm going to shoot you, you have a right to take action, defensive action, and do something to their body because they're threatening you with violence. Or somebody came and started beating you with a baseball bat and saying, I want all your money and possessions. You have every right to fight back against them physically with whatever amount of force is required to subdue that attack. That's within your rights because you're defending your property, your body. And they had no right coming with violence against your property, your body. And your body is your property. You know, I find it so difficult. People often, you say, listen, is your body your property? And people can't spit out the answer, yes. Yes, my body is my property. How could it be any other way? Is it yours? Does it belong to someone else?
You know how it is yours, but technically it's not, and they've already given it away and they don't even realize it. And again, knowledge is power, Mark. All right, I'm gonna cut us off right there because we're going to break. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Mark and I will be back in a few minutes. Don't go anywhere. We are back, ladies and gentlemen, and as happens sometimes during the break, the conversation continues, and sometimes it's hard to repeat some of the epic conversation that goes on behind the scenes. But Mark and I will try to, I guess, sum it up in a nutshell for you. But Mark, I would say a lot of this, the best word people could learn for the day, I think, is causality.
That's right. See, we were talking about off air that the main reason people remain enslaved is because the masses of humanity do not want it to be true that there are natural laws in existence that govern the consequences of their behavior, that actually bring about consequences for specific behaviors that they have chosen. And since it simply is that way, and man did not make it that way, what man is saying on a microcosmic scale, okay, but in mass numbers, okay, the mass quantities of people are all saying, I want it to be both ways. I want to be able to act however I want and have my freedom. I want to remain completely ignorant of the laws of creation and how they work, but yet I want to be free simultaneously. And by saying that, what you're actually in effect saying to creation is, I don't care about any of the laws of creation. I want to get to make up how things are. And that's called playing God. What man at a microcosmic level is saying is, I want to be God because I don't want there to be any consequences for my behaviors. I don't want there to be any repercussions for ignorance, okay? And as a result of man wanting to be God at that fundamental level through his ignorance and his refusal to learn the laws of creation, what's happening also at a microcosmic scale, but at a larger level, you could look at it as a macrocosmic scale when it comes to life here on Earth, is we have allowed the building of this prison architecture ruled by this psychopathic elite that wants to be God and is actively enslaving the hordes of humanity. So, in other words, through man wanting to be God and not addressing the issue of his denial of natural law, okay, the projection of that refusal and denial to grow in consciousness and understand the operations of reality, the actual laws that govern reality, we have created this force that is enslaving us, okay, that we call the Illuminati, we call the dark occultists, we call the psychopathic elite, whatever you want to call them. It doesn't make a difference what you call them. That's a macrocosmic representation of man's desire to be the arbiter of truth, or in other words, to be God at a microcosmic level, by saying, I just want reality to work how I want it to work. You know, they have the savior complex of somebody's going to save me and I'm going to stay in ignorance, but somehow I'm going to magically be granted my freedom. And they actually want reality to work that way. So this is proof of the principle of correspondence, which is another natural law, that as things are generated in the microcosm, they will be reflected to us in the macrocosm. Or in other words, as something happens at a big scale on a very small level, but built up in like a quantum effect, you could say, okay? The very small level is the level of the individual who exists in ignorance and choosing behaviors outside of the boundaries of natural law, right and wrong. But so many people are doing that, and so many people are refusing to acknowledge that these laws actually exist and govern their behavior, that they're actually creating this huge buildup effect that is putting into effect at the macrocosmic, or the larger level, the worldwide prison system that they're then living in. So this is proof of what's called the principle of correspondence, or in other words, that the universe is self-similar across scales and in scales of consciousness as well. As people at the individual level think, the universe will rearrange their external reality to reflect back to them how they think at a small level. It will arrange that at a larger level. So this is called the law of correspondence, and it goes hand in hand with the law of cause and effect. And the law of correspondence basically states that which is below, or in other words, at the microcosmic or the very small scale, is similar or is like to that which is above, or in other words, the macrocosmic or the very large scale. All it's saying is, as goes on at the very small level, will be actually built up and magnified and will be reflected back to you at the very large level.
Wait a minute. That sounds vaguely familiar, Mark. Let me guess. That sounds something like as above, so below. Now, where have I heard that before? In
its short and abbreviated form, that is the law of correspondence. And this is not a belief system. All of the people who think that this is a belief and who think that it is dependent upon them whether this is in effect in their lives, this law, are delusional. You're delusional if you actually believe that it is dependent upon whether you believe in that principle is in operation in nature. It's not dependent on your belief system because you're not God. You didn't make that law. So I hear people ridiculously state, I don't believe in that. That's not my belief. It doesn't matter what you believe. That's like trying to say, listen, I don't believe flame is hot. I don't believe flame will burn my hand. I'm going to go and turn on my gas stove. I'm going to put my hand in the blue hot flame and it will be fine, man. It will be fine because I don't believe that those flames will burn my flesh. Well, enjoy it, my friend. Enjoy. I don't believe in gravity. Let's take a running leap off of that cliff and just believe we can leap up off into the air like Superman and fly. Good luck with that. Enjoy what you're going to get. It's your funeral is what I'm trying to say. I'm only here trying to explain to you the operations of the laws of gravity. And it's like a person who's so deranged saying, I don't believe in gravity. Get out of here. Go away. Stop bothering me. I'm going off that cliff and I believe I can fly. Well, enjoy what you're going to get. And that's all I'm here doing. I'm explaining to you how a universal law that you have no say over operates. And this is the problem.
Well, it's got to make you wonder. It's really got to make you wonder and think, Mark, when you look at it again. That's why I brought up the Freemason saying, as above, so below, because that
isn't really Freemasonic. They borrow that term, but it comes
of course,
from immensely older tradition.
You see what I mean? It's again, people will say, now, I guess would you call it, the My Truth movement or My Freedom movement?
Right.
And people will look at it and say, well, for them to kind of, maybe if they don't understand, look at what the Masons, okay? Look at what I don't want to say the Masons because I hate that term too. Look what Freemasonry believes, okay? Right. As above, so below. Now, why would these guys put so much into that? They really, with their symbolism, they really go into that theme of as above, so below. Look at the Washington Monument. That's what the Washington Monument with the reflecting pool, that's what the reflecting pool is there for, because of the as above, so below. They push that hardcore. Now, if they believe in it so hardcore, there's got to be something to it, right?
That's partially true, but it's even beyond that. The reason people want to disidentify with this, or say that it isn't true, I should say, not even disidentify with it, but they just want to make a claim that's based on a logical fallacy that this isn't true. And that's the fallacy that if somebody I don't like or approve of says it, then it can't be true. Well, Hitler could have made the statement 2 + 2 is 4. And it's still going to be true even if Hitler said it, okay? You may completely hate and loathe everything that someone like that stood for in the Nazi Party and all of the crimes against humanity that he committed and wanted to continue to commit. However, the whole bottom line is that person is still capable of making a statement that is true. So, you'll bring up philosophy of some of the founding fathers and what they thought about self-ownership. Okay, and people will say, well, the founding fathers kept slaves. They kept black slaves. Yes, that's true, they did. Well, what does this have to do with this principle that I'm talking about that they may have understood? Okay? If they understood it and they didn't practice it, it doesn't take away from them saying something and it happened to be true. It just means they didn't live up to that ideal and practice it in real life. Okay, they fell short from the ideal. But that doesn't mean that something somebody says can't be true. Just because they may even be hypocritical of it doesn't take away from the fact that the statement is true. Somebody can say stealing is wrong, and then at some future point in their life, they might go out and steal. Well, that means that they may be a hypocrite and they may have contradicted the truth, okay, in their own life, but that doesn't negate the fact that stealing is wrong. Okay? This is what people have to understand. They can't say just because someone you don't like or you disagree with said it, that makes it untrue. This is a complete logical fallacy. So to go back to the concept of ownership and the transgressions against self-ownership, we have to understand rights are all about understanding what wrongs are. To understand what a right is, what our rights are. This is why we're in this mess. We don't understand what our rights are. And part of the reason is because we don't understand what wrongs are. Wrongs are any actions that we don't have a right to take because they cause harm. That's what a wrong is. You're not allowed to do that. It causes harm to someone else. And it's all based on the principle of ownership. So I was talking about murder. You could throw assault in there. That could be seen as intention to do bodily harm that could lead to death, okay? Rape is the second natural law transgression. This is taking away someone's sexual freedom to sexually associate with who they will. And you don't have a right to just say, I'm going to take you sexually in whatever way I feel like, even if you don't agree. That's why it's called rape. It's another wrong under natural law. Okay? Theft is the third wrong, the third transgression under natural law. That's taking someone's property that you didn't own. In the example of the bicycle, that's a direct theft of a piece of property. And then trespass is another theft. That's the theft of the security in someone's living space that they happen to be living in that you don't have a right to intrude upon without permission to be there. Okay? So murder, rape, theft, and trespass are considered the 4 overarching natural law transgressions. But if you boil them all down, if you really distill them down to their essence, okay, every single one of them comes down to the principle of ownership, because every single one of these is a form of theft. Theft is ultimately the only wrong. It is the only transgression against natural law. There are just different kinds of theft. There's theft of different things, okay? So what is murder? Could you rephrase murder and say that it is the theft of life that did not belong to you, of the life of another? You thieved it. You robbed it from someone else. They were using it. You took it. That's called murder. That's a theft. Okay? Rape is a theft of someone's freedom to associate sexually with who they will. You don't have a right to take that from someone. That's called theft. Okay? Theft itself is self-explanatory. That's the actual theft of physical property, of actual inanimate property things. Okay? And then trespass is the theft of someone's security in their living space, which you don't have a right to intrude upon without being asked to be there. Okay? If you don't have a right to be there because someone invited you and they happen to be using that space, then that's trespass, and that's a form of theft. You're thieving someone's security. Okay? So murder, rape, theft, trespass, the natural law transgressions are all boiled down to one overarching transgression against right, which is called theft. That's the ultimate wrong. Every other wrong is a form of theft. And I was talking to Bob Tuscan earlier, and I said to him that really what this whole construct is, what the souls are here on earth to learn, and they're never leaving this place or someplace like it. Whether this place exists like this or another place, they have to go to another place to continue their learning process. You're never getting out of this physical kind of life until you learn the one overarching principle that if it isn't yours, don't take it away from someone else who does own it. That's it. That's what we're all here to learn. When it comes to life, when it comes to rights, when it comes to property, you're not to take something that doesn't belong to you. And yes, there is such a thing as belonging. There is such a thing as ownership. People want to go to so far of a right-brained extreme that they think they own nothing. While I'm in the vehicle that my consciousness inhabits here in this physical domain, I own my body. The end. Okay? You could say you never really own it because you're going to die and it's going to go back to the earth. Fine. You want to look at it like that, then I am the steward of it while I'm here, while my consciousness happens to inhabit this vehicle. But for all intents and purposes, that means I own it. And no one has the right to take it from me because I'm using it. Okay? So my body does belong to me in so many words. Okay? We don't need to get into semantical arguments about the ownership of the body because it's temporary and you're not going to have this body forever. It doesn't make a difference. You're not going to have anything forever. But while you're here, you do maintain the right to own certain things, okay? Like your body, like your rights, like certain property that you have and you are currently using, okay? So when someone comes and says, I'm going to levy a tax, I'm going to say, you must give me this. You don't have a choice, right? I'm saying it is the law. You now have a moral obligation to pay me a certain amount that, by the way, I'm going to arbitrarily set, okay? And you have no right to refuse, all right? So let's say that happens to be an amount based on a property that you own, like a property tax. I'm going to say 10%. You got to pay me every year. You don't pay me 10% of what that house is worth, or even if it's 1%, it doesn't matter how low or high it is. Let's say it's 1% of what the house is worth. Pay me that every year, or I'm coming and taking the house by force. No, not by force. I'm sorry. That's the wrong use of the word force. I'm coming and taking it by violence, which is the undue initiation of force, which you don't have a right to take. Okay? That's what violence is. Okay? So that's what all taxes are. It's a claim of ownership. That's saying you don't really
Force
own
is
that
what
property.
I would use to end your violence upon my person.
That's correct. That's correct. So think about it. Does anyone really own their house in the United States? Look, let's forget the house for a minute, because people think they think that if it applies to a house, somehow that makes it different. Do you have a television in your house, or an oven, a stove, an oven, whatever? Just name a piece of property that's in your house. Your computer. You own a computer, okay? Your computer, is that your property?
I guess, yeah. I mean, technically, I own it, right? I paid for it. It's physically mine on my desk.
That's contained in the term, your computer. The possessive case is representative of, it means that it's your computer. That means you own it. You are the owner of that computer. Nobody is allowed to just walk in your house, pick up your computer, your keyboard, your monitor, and walk out of the house and say, hey, see you later.
Yeah, true. No, if they did, they'd get shot.
Right, because you own that thing and you're using it right now, and they don't have a right to just take that, okay? So that's property. Now, what if I said to you, Popeye, listen, I'm declaring that you must give me for a service that, whether you want it or not, I am now going to be the person who fixes any little issues that happen with that computer. You have no right to refuse, okay? I'm going to be the person who fixes any issues that crop up on that computer, whether you want me to or not. I will be in your house at this time. I will come over. I will look at the computer. I will do a diagnostic, and I will decide what needs to be done.
Sounds like the mafia.
Okay, and you have to pay me what I say for that service that I'm going to render, and it may go up incrementally every year, but you have no right to refuse, and if you do refuse, I'm coming in there with whatever amount of violence I need to bring to take that computer and take it out of your house. What would you say?
Yeah, I'd be like, you're
probably
shit
wouldn't
crazy.
say
You're out
much,
of your mind. I'd be like, dude, you're out of your mind.
You'd probably be sitting there with an AR-15 saying, try to do it, right?
Yeah, well, you mean you wouldn't let somebody do that when you put it in that term or in that example. That's a really good way for people to look at it. You wouldn't let somebody come in your house and just take your computer and be like, I'm gonna come work on it once a week, 8 o'clock in the morning. Don't worry, I made myself a key, and I'll just let myself in, and don't worry,
There's no right to refuse my service.
Yeah, and if you have to pay me whatever the hell
I'm
tell
going
you.
to arbitrarily set the cost on that. What I say is fair, and if you don't pay that, I'm taking the computer.
Yeah, and if you try to stop me, Jimmy the Fist, Johnny Five Fingers is going to come down and beat your head in with a mallet.
Now, this is what property tax is. It's the exact same thing. There is zero difference, and anybody that claims that there is difference is lying to themselves, okay? They're just completely full of crap. They're not being honest, because that's what a property tax is. In no uncertain terms, that's what it is. Now, what is a person who must obey the dictates of someone else, has no right to refuse, and ultimately, as a result of this practice, really it doesn't own anything, because that's not yours. If I can do whatever I want with it and you can't, then that doesn't belong to you. It belongs to me. Therefore, I own all property, okay? And you are the person who must obey my dictates and commands. You have no right to refuse, or violence will be done to you. Tell me what the name of that relationship is.
Huh.
What is the definition? But I'm saying...
Abusive?
It's abusive, but the name of the relationship is the relationship between a master and a slave.
Oh, well, yeah, slavery. Good point.
And that's where we're at. We don't live in a democracy. We don't live in a constitutional republic, or anything resembling anything like that.
We live in an illusion of freedom.
And there's a specific word for the kind of government that we actually live in. So what is the practice of there's no private ownership by the people, okay? A landlord owns the land, allows the people to live on the land and work on it as long as they pay tribute to that lord. Tell me what that system of government is called.
Sounds like communism.
It's called feudalism.
Oh, yeah, that's what it's called, feudalism.
Feudalism.
Like serfs and kings and everything from a couple hundred years ago.
That's
Isn't that what we fought to get away from?
That we live under.
Mark, we're out of time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening.